Space Dandy Season 2, Episode 11, An Other Dimensional Tale, baby. I definitely enjoyed this episode. It had comedy, it had really comedic action. I love how once they had the 2D portion of the episode, all of the action in 2D was basically just a video game, and it was, at one point, they actually just did like Galaga, which I really loved, so I enjoyed that. And I love the more dramatic portions of this episode, too. It wasn't as crazy as last week's episode where it was really, really emotional and dramatic towards the end of the episode, but they had a really cool concept about them warping through space, and it kind of blew my mind at the end when the fourth dimensional Catherine was explaining what it means to warp and stuff like that. And I don't know if anyone noticed at the end when Dandy started to explain it, and I didn't catch this until he was almost at the end, but when he mentioned how like the teddy bear stuff, like in one dimension the teddy bear will realize I am this, and in the other dimension, or before warping, the same thing will happen. The backgrounds were different to show that those were two separate dandies, so we could actually see it from the perspective of the fourth dimensional. And then when she actually said, you know, the warping before and warping after makes you two separate people, it means that you're not the dandy I fell in love with. Of course, they reference this kind of early on in the episode after the flashback when they talk about how they went through warping so much in that episode that we didn't really get to see, but they did it so much for whatever alien they were chasing that they probably went through like 10 or 12 different versions of themselves, so there's no way it could possibly be the same dandy after that happened. So yeah, it was really cool, that little concept at the end. It kind of just blew my mind. I was like, that's a really cool way to look at warping through space, where it's almost like creating a new dimension every time you do it. But I did love the episode. I love them talking about all the different dimensions. Like there was 1D. We even found out that there was a 0D at the end, which I thought might happen when they mentioned 1D, but I was like, what would that possibly look like? And then we find out it's just a dot, but I loved all the silly little dimensions. They didn't mention a fifth dimension, so it's probably, canon-wise at least, 0 to 4, but I definitely loved it. It was interesting to see Catherine sort of interact with things, like when she would drink something, when they finally showed what she looked like, it was just like, it just disappeared, and then she was like blowing smoke. I don't know if she had a cigarette or what that was, but she was just like blowing smoke, and you know, it was like almost instantaneous interaction, so that was pretty interesting to see. A lot of Gogol was in this one. Didn't get too much from them, of course, just more comedy. They actually did have a pretty big part in this episode, though. They were kind of, by the end of the episode, they were going to do exactly the same thing as Dandy and his crew were, which was destroy the interdimensional hyperdrive, basically. And unfortunately, when they do that, that's when they get sucked into the 1D dimension, which is just like sound waves. So I thought that was pretty cool. But, you know, them in there was pretty good. We also learned that the guy who's like the boss on the ship that we see all the time, he's actually a scientist, which I had no idea he was a scientist. I thought he was just like the leader. There was the one episode where he kind of went crazy and he was drawing numbers and stuff, but I thought that was just because he was going crazy. But he is actually a scientist, so that was like the tiniest bit of information that we randomly got out of that guy. Honey had a pretty big spot in this episode as well when she stowed away on the ship and she was trying to marry the 1D prince that Catherine ended up going for instead of Dandy in the past, Paul. But she found out he was just a rectangle with a crown, which I thought was really funny. Just, you know, you couldn't tell what was what. It's just a bunch of dots for people, and then you see him and he's just blue and there's a crown on his head and it's like he's the king. So I thought that was pretty funny, or the prince. But I thought that was really funny, her trying to go through and marry this random guy. But it was cool to see her kind of get a spotlight in this episode, see more of her. I didn't learn anything from her, but I didn't expect to, really. It wasn't like her story or anything, but it was cool to see her in this episode a lot. I definitely loved it. It was really cool, them cutting through the 1D dimension with the scissors and stuff, which I also thought was funny. And when it first comes up, it looks like the blade, I can't think of the actual name, but it looks like the weapon that the aliens use in the Halo franchise. When it first comes up, before it actually opens and it's closed, it looks just like that weapon. So I thought that might have been an actual reference to that. I thought it was actually going to light up and everything when they first came out, because it's Space Dandy, that's kind of what it does. But it just opens up and they cut through and they, you know, destroy all the ships with the cool little shockwave and all the little 8-bit sound effects and stuff. So I definitely love this episode. like I said, it had its funny moments. It was mostly comedy until like the very end, but it was really, really good. I really enjoyed this one. Something about this story just really kept me entertained. It was sort of a love story that we had, not like last week's episode, but like a love lost, and she was torn. Catherine was torn between Danny and Paul, and she chose Paul in the end. And then they meet each other when Paul finds a way to travel through dimensions, and so it was just really cool. It was like sort of a love story, but we knew they weren't actually going to end up together in the end. And he still helped her out because he still cared about her. And they went to defeat Paul, and it was sort of actiony. And then we also got like the global side of things when they were trapped inside of the 2D dimension, and we got the really silly part of the action where it was like old 8-bit games. And I really love that when they were first going into the hyperdrive, like they were shooting the ships going up and down, and then like, oh, it's getting really narrow, and it looked just like a video game where you go through the level and then it gets smaller and smaller. So I thought that was a cool reference too. But I definitely love this episode. Of course, comment below, let me know what you guys thought about it, your favorite parts, the least favorite parts. And I guess the biggest question right now is, what is your favorite dimension? Because we've got 0 through 4 now, so us being third dimension creatures, what is your favorite dimension that you saw in this episode? Comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.